If you have submitted the assignments that is given in last class.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Today we'll discuss about counseling and psychotherapy. So as you know, we have a counseling center here in Nigeria, isn't it? So if you have ever visited counseling center for any counseling services, you must have known what's going on. But why it is important, how it is different from psychotherapy, why counseling is a preventive approach, all these issues will discuss in today and on subsequent classes regarding this in one or two more sessions. So in recent years, both counseling and psychotherapy have been demonstrated on television with real clients and discussed on radio programs. And during this corona pandemic also, there was a huge demand for counselors because people were homebound and they faced many psychosocial issues for which they were looking for some kind of uh, external help or people outside the family to whom they can talk to and share their issues so that they would get some kind of relief from the stress, immediate stress that they are experiencing during this pandemic. And subsequently, you must have found in some of the uh, radio and television channels online counseling, or this is live counseling sessions that was also there. If you go to ministry's website, uh, you would also find some relevant material on COVID-19 and the mental health issues and counseling practices. There are numerous YouTube clips also illustrating therapy too. So it is very likely most people today probably have at least some notion of what counseling is, since the term is now used so widely. However, misunderstandings and disagreements still abound about what the differences are between advice giving, counseling, psychotherapy, coaching, mentoring, and similar terms. Although we cannot go into it all here, it is true to say that a whole host of activities, professions, and relationships, from befriending, co-counseling, and mutual aid groups to clinical psychology, counseling psychology, coaching psychology, psychiatry, and social work, in some ways resemble and overlap with each other. So we'll focus on understanding of counseling skills, counseling, and psychotherapy before going to look succinctly at different approaches. So before I proceed, let me understand from you, what is your understanding of counseling? Because this is a very household term these days, very common. Everyone knows about counseling. So what is the meaning of counseling? What do you understand by counseling? Please raise your hands so that we can discuss. Yes, Rutaj.
So it is essentially having someone to speak to where you can like express your concerns and your emotions and try to deal with something that might have happened.
that you do with your friends also? Are they counselors?
Except the counselors are more certified to be counselors, and friends are more like emotional support.
Hmm.
Like
Okay.
counselors have learned and have trained in techniques to help us deal with anything that might have happened.
And
That is what I understand.
okay. Uh, does it make any difference in people's lives if they approach a professional and not somebody to whom they trust?
So I would say it differs from person to person. Like some people would benefit from speaking to a counselor, whereas for some people, having their friends is enough and doesn't make a difference to go to a counselor.
Okay. Any other reactions? Any other views on what counseling is? Please participate in the classroom discussions because, as you know, we do not have a one way communication. Yeah, Rahul Meher.
Sir, when we speak to anyone else regarding our problems, it we get a feeling that our pain is being shared in a
Mm,
way. This
mm,
also works with friends, but there should be two key things that must happen.
mm,
First, they should actually pay attention to you
mm,
and take care. No, they
mm.
should, what is it, not take care, uh, at least pretend that they care.
Okay. Mm,
If that doesn't happen, it will have a negative effect.
mm.
Counselors will be obviously better because they're trained to help people. But talking with friends also helps to some extent.
Okay, which kind of counseling practice or what skill of the counselor differentiates from uh, an individual who is close to you and the counselor? What is the extra skill the counselor is having, do you think?
They understand human emotions better.
Okay. Mhm.
Uh,
Utkarsh?
Yes, sir. So counselors actually accept whatever things we are like undergone, any
Hmm.
mistake that we do, they just give acceptance to us. And
Great.
when
This
we
is
are
the, this is
communicating,
this is one of the important points in counseling practices. You are accepted as you are. Yeah, go ahead.
and when you are at your with talking to your friends or your family,
Hmm.
it would naturally come something like any event that you do or any mistake that you do, your parents or your family members or your friend will be at some point they will be judging because they know they can't expect you that you can do this. So
Yes.
at that particular point of time, you want that someone can accept you, someone can just take you that, okay, fine, you have done the mistake, that's fine, now let's move ahead. That happens with counselors. But for your family members or your friends, they will be first criticizing you. Why do you do this? Why do you even thought of this? Why do you
Hmm.
took this step? And after that, then they will be bringing you the solution. So the
Exactly.
first,
Yeah.
that is the difference between counselor and a family member or someone you are close by.
Yeah. Good point you have added, Utkarsh. Yeah, definitely. This is one of the greatest skills of the counselors. They become non-judgmental while they listen to a client uh, or an individual rather. Uh, so this makes the whole difference. The whole society is judging you, be it seniors, juniors, whoever are there, and if they know you, even if at times, if they do not know you, still then they judge you based on your behavior, based on your style, whatever you say, you are being judged. You cannot but judged every time. But as counselors, The special kind of training they have received is not to judge, accept people as they are. And that makes the whole difference between a novice and a counselor. Thank you for this discussion. Let's go ahead to the next section on the skills. Terms such as counseling skills, communication skills, interpersonal or relationship skills are often but not always used interchangeably. It is sometimes thought that there are certain communication and relationship building skills that all or most approaches have in common, and these tend to be skills used intentionally in conversation toward certain helpful ends. Counseling skills may be said to differ from everyday casual conversation in the ways as: number one, while much ordinary conversation is characterized by rather casual, perhaps somewhat inattentive listening. We have already discussed about this inattentive listening or attentive listening. A key counseling skill is active listening, which involves the conscious discipline of setting aside one's own preoccupations in order to concentrate as fully as possible on what the other person is expressing. This may involve a high level of awareness of one's own prejudices and idiosyncrasies. What is emphasized here is that counselor is also another individual like you, having his her own prejudices and idiosyncrasies, but the kind of training they have received through years of practice or maybe through their studies, they have mastered the skill of active listening and being non-judgmental. Now coming to the second uh, skill. While ordinary conversation may contain a great deal of interaction, anecdotes, sharing thoughts and ideas, and changing the subject aimlessly, another key counseling skill involves the discipline of responding mainly to the other person in a purposeful, non-judgmental, and often rather serious way, which tends to mean that such conversation usually has a somewhat one-way character. There is a goal. We just can't talk aimlessly in a counseling session because the individual has come to solve a problem. Well, counselors do not solve the problems, that's for sure. Counselors can accept the person as they are, and they would give different kind of choices that is available to the individual. Now it is up to the individual to take up one or the other choice based on his or her suitability. That is the job. Counselors will not guide, this is you should do or you should not do. No judgment, not at all. But some of the options will be given to you so that you can conveniently take a decision based on your suitability. Number third, the difference between casual conversation and counseling is while ordinary is not usually constrained by any agreement about confidentiality, counseling skills are usually backed up by either an implicit or explicit understanding about confidentiality. This is one of the critical issues where we need to discuss a little bit. We all know that when someone comes to a counselor for help, they tell or they share very personal experiences with the counselor. And because they believe the counselor will keep this information up to himself or herself and will not divulge with anyone else. That's an explicit or implicit understanding. Either you can say directly that, yes, whatever I am going to share with you will be between you and me, and no third person would ever be able to know about it. At the beginning, you may tell it explicitly, or there is implicit understanding that it is not going to be divulged. But the kind of training the counselors get, I'm talking especially in our context in India, we hardly do follow an ethical practice in counseling for a number of reasons. Now, let me tell you, the reasons could be uh, to whom we appoint as counselors, they are actually not counselors. And the purpose for which they are being appointed, most of them do not have the skills. For that matter, they are not responsible for the situation. The situation is with the kind of syllabus, the kind of education, the kind of training they get, and the kind of training available in the country. It is not giving the support they need to develop their skills. In most of the university settings, as well as in schools and colleges, people who do not have any counseling degree per se or diploma specifically are being appointed as counselors. They do not have any registration number. So even if you share some of the very personal issues with them, there is no guarantee that it will not be divulged anytime, even after the counselor leaves the job. And most of the jobs are temporary in nature. So given this background, it is not possible to control the professional practice in an ethical way. So uh, in such a situation, we need to prepare the counselors for future, keeping this ethics and professional practice in view, and the kind of training is given to them need to be standardized, and there should be a mandatory registration for the counselors so that they would bound to follow some set of uh, ethical guidelines prepared by the registering authority. It could be under Public Health Act, it could be under Medical Council Act, or it could be under Rehabilitation Council of India Act. Any kind of act, there must be some binding principles for them. Currently, we do not have any. Further, when it comes to counselors, you would find that not all counselors have been trained uh, from psychology, because the subject which is important to become a counselor is they must have at least a bachelor's master's degree in counseling in psychology, and then they must have a specialized training in counseling. But you will find people from other subjects, like we'll find some people from political science, history, economics, commerce. They have done some 6 months course on counseling, and in many of these situations they are also appointed as counselors. If we have the database, we will find out uh, what is the training and skills they have. So before somebody approaches a counselor, they must go through a background check. When you approach a doctor, You know that the person must be an MBBS, MD, or whatever. If you go to an Ayurvedic doctor, he must be a BAMS, or a homeopathy doctor is BHMS kind of degrees they must hold, which is a legal uh, sanction to their professional practice. But so far as counseling practices are concerned, there are no such kind of regulations available in our country so far. So confidentiality becomes a biggest challenge when you talk about counseling practices in our country. Now, number 4, difference between ordinary conversation and counseling is often thought to be natural. Ordinary conversation is often thought to be natural and to have no particular rules governing it. Counseling skills may often feel or be experienced as somewhat unnatural. For example, the person using counseling skills may strive to understand very accurately and demonstrate this striving by sometimes repeating parts of others' statements in order to clarify or deepen understanding. This is generally uh, not happening when you talk to a friend. So that is why talking to a friend for help and talking to a counselor for help are different, because counselor know how to guide the talk, but friends do talk like they talk normally. Finally, the fifth difference is, while much ordinary conversation wanders across many subjects with no necessary goal, counseling skills are generally associated with some sort of goal, be it helping with a decision making. Remember it, helping with a decision making, not telling this decision to be taken, helping with decision making, offering an opportunity to discharge emotions, offering alternative interpretations, or suggesting strategies for making desired changes. So we are providing options to follow, to take up. In ordinary conversations, there are no such goals to be discussed. Till now, whatever we have discussed, if you have any questions, let us discuss them, and then I'll go ahead to the next section. Was it audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So any questions now, so that we can discuss some 2 or 3 questions and then go ahead to the next section. No questions, no discussions? So I am moving ahead. Although there is some disagreement about the extent to which counseling skills may be possessed naturally by many people, it is widely, although not universally, believed that the skills have to be identified, understood, learned, and practiced repeatedly if one is to be able to be a consistently good listener and effective helper. So these are the primary skills: a very good listener and an effective helper. Also, it is important to remember that while skills of this kind may be learned by many professionals, sometimes for their own ends, for example, salespeople intending to win customers over, the use of counseling skills is properly associated with therapeutic helping or healing ends and not with self-centered agendas. So when uh, this salespeople counsel customers, the goal is to buy the customers or make the customer buy the products. It is not here in counseling process. Counseling process is aimed at helping the needy, not helping the counselor. Counseling skills may be used in all sorts of situations: in the classroom, at a hospital bedside, in training settings, or at bus stops or parties. In other words, they may be used within professional contexts, in voluntary work, or simply in everyday social and domestic settings. When someone is trying to listen in a to be as helpful, constructive, or interested as possible. Fairly typically, students on counseling skills courses may be nurses, teachers, ministers of religion, residential social workers, and similar professionals, as well as those engaged in voluntary work. Typically, too, on counseling skills courses is more some sort of model, 3 or 5 stages of the helping process, drawn from the ideas of G. Egan, he is an emeritus professor of psychology and organization studies, Richard Nelson Jones, who is a counseling psychologist, Sue Kulley, counselor, and others, usually advocating systematic practice in basic and advanced empathy, paraphrasing, summarizing, open questioning, challenging, and so on. So this is how the training of counselor is done. So counseling differs in its formality from interactions where counseling skills are used. Counseling is generally characterized by an explicit agreement between a counselor and a client to meet in a certain private setting at agreed times and under disciplined conditions of confidentiality with ethical parameters, protected time, and specified aims. In the past decade, the setting has become more flexible with the advent of internet-based therapy websites and voice over IP providers such as Skype and VC. And now we have host of many other internet-based uh, opportunities we can do for telecounseling. Usually, the counselor will have had a certain level of training beyond the level of a certificate in counseling skills, typically a diploma or above, will belong to a professional body with a published code of ethics and will receive confidential supervision for her or his counseling. In some countries, state licensure exists, such as in the USA, which is independent of the professional bodies. So this is what is required. Every country need some kind of professional body which will regulate the professional practices of these counselors. And without that professional body, we may not get the services of the counselors in an ethical way. That is why it is required. It is widely accepted that counseling may be a suitable form of help for a variety of personal problems or concerns, the most common being depression, anxiety, stress, bereavement, relationship difficulties, life crisis and traumas, addictions, self-defeating behavior, and thwarted ambitions. It can help with issues of loss, confusion, and other negative conditions, or it may also be used more proactively and educationally to learn, for example, how to relax, to be more assertive, deal with stress, and lead a more fulfilling life. It is not essential to know where counseling comes from etymologically, historically, and so on, but it probably does help to consider a few facts. The term itself does, of course, stem from the verb to counsel, which has always meant to advise. So it is not surprising that some people still have this misconception about counseling. Although some forms of counseling contain some advice giving components, counseling is mostly dedicated to enhancing or restoring clients' own self understanding, decision making resources, risk taking, and personal growth. Telling people what to do is therefore usually issued as a short term and often counterproductive remedy. So do not tell people what to do. Counselors never tell it. If you find any counselor tells you do this, do that, then this is not counseling. You might be getting some advice what to do and what not to do. And that happens in families too. When when family members talk to you, they judge you and then they give you advice. Historically, a great deal of counseling in Britain has been associated with the non-directive, client-centered approach of the psychologist and psychotherapist Carl Rogers, C-A-R-L, Carl Rogers, R-O-G-E-R-S, Rogers. And indeed, we have to thank Rogers as one of the most active promoters of counseling in the USA. Many early British counselors too took their ideas and training from Rogers' approach, which, as we uh, will see in later discussions, rests heavily and optimistically on belief in the innate resourcefulness and goodness of human beings. What Rogers says is that as human beings, we all are good. We have a tendency to remain good and doing good. But it is important to know that hundreds of different theoretical approaches to counseling now exist, many of which do not share Rogers' views and some of which may be almost diametrically opposed to Rogers. In some countries, such as England and Wales, there has been an increasing demand by the National Health Service for counselors to practice brief cognitive behavioral therapy in order to limit therapeutic costs. Counseling can be seen as a very broad and potentially confusing field of learning itself. Now, here is the uh, problem. Where to stop? Where is the boundary line? To what extent an counselor would remain to the practice of the training that she or he has received, and to what extent the counselor can also practice some kind of therapy, because therapy is not a part of counseling. Counselors would open up choices to help the client take a decision and then move on. But in some cases, in order to reduce the therapeutic cost, in some of the countries, now talking about India, we have not reached at this stage, but this is what is how it is practiced outside. We do not have any regulations. We do not have any kind of guidelines how to go about it. It may help when you come to consider differing approaches to counseling and psychotherapy to remember that each is necessarily an imperfect product of a certain time and place, which in its own way strives to make sense of distress and to promote methods of effective help. While each approach emphasizes certain aspects of human functioning and therapeutic skills, it has been argued that most depend on common factors such as healing or relationship, a good fit between client and counselor, the readiness of clients to be helped, the belief of clients and counselors in the efficacy of counseling, and the plausibility of espoused theories. So this is where we have talked about counseling and the skills, the practice, the training, and the processes, how it is done. Coming to the practices that we follow, let me give you an example of this corona pandemic. What happened during this pandemic? Since I am in this field, I came to know all of a sudden there is a huge demand for these counselors, and um, many of the school counselors lost their jobs because schools were closed and they were not uh, on a permanent employment or regular employment, and now they have opted for this temporary counseling services for which they are paid for. But at the same time, there is no guarantee that that will continue for long, because once the pandemic is over, the demand for the counselors will come down, and they will not get the same number of clients that they were getting when there was lockdown throughout the country. And I guess most of us have had some issues which was very uncomfortable for us to discuss with anyone except with an outsider or whom you can call a counselor, can be a source of help, and we do not know whether they are qualified enough or not, but the numbers are given. There are many helpline numbers were given, and people discussed many things with those counselors, not knowing whether those personal issues would be divulged somewhere or not. There is no agreement as such, or there is no kind of sign that yes, keep it confidential or something like that. This is how we are doing the counseling. Uh, in this situation, what is your opinion about the counselors that we have in various places who are providing their services? Do you think they must be abide by some kind of professional or ethical guidelines, or we should keep it open? Now the question is for the entire class to discuss. Because we are in a helping profession, and we know what doctors are doing, being professionals, being registered practitioners. We know how some doctors are into unethical practices. Many professionals, it is not about doctors only, many professionals are into unethical practices, but still then they have a registering body, they have certain registration number if they practice, and they are answerable to the authority. But in counseling practices, it is not there. So what is your opinion? Should we have counselors to go through some kind of professional registration process and follow certain ethical guidelines, or we just allow anybody and everybody to become a counselor and come and practice? I hope the question is understood by you all.
Sir, could you? I'm sorry, I couldn't. My network got cut.
Shall I repeat the question?
Yes, sir. Can you
Okay,
repeat?
yeah. Uh, we have discussed on the counseling processes, practices, its effectiveness, efficacies, and everything, the skills, how it is different from ordinary talk, advice giving, or all things. Now, as a professional, should counselors be uh, abide by some kind of rules, through rules and regulations, through a professional body, and follow ethical guidelines, or should we allow anyone and everyone to become a counselor and do practice the way they please? Yes, Assis and Gaurav, Kushal. Okay,
So I think they should have some rules and regulation and guided by a professional bodies.
should have some rules and regulations and professional bodies. Okay, Gaurav.
Yes, sir. In my view, they should is also same. Like they should have a professional body to control their organization. Like, and they should have like go through some courses like expertise in the counselors should expertise in have the expertise in that to counsel with youths like us or to counsel with prisoners. In many countries prisoners are also allowed to consult to the counselors, but in India it is not like that. So uh, different fields of counselors should be there under a organization, I think, like that. Means
Yes,
for youth they should counsel uh, contact with another proper counselor, or for prisoners, or for that like criminals they should have another counselors, like, or for the elderly people they should consult with another kind of counselors. So like that some specific branches of counselors should be there under a specific organization, so it would function betterly if we go to we if we go, I mean, if our country, or if we follow this way counseling, sir. So it will not be messed up, and it will be a properly organized way.
very good, very good. We do not have as such any specific criteria or specific training for specific group of people. For example, if somebody wants to go for a geriatric counseling, uh, we don't have any such kind of opportunity in our country. We only have mostly guidance and counseling that is offered by National Council of Educational Research and Training, where it is given to the teachers, teachers who are already in job, and they can take this counseling course and do an extra job of counseling. But in my opinion, teachers must teach. They should not do both the processes like counseling and teaching, because it will be too much. Counseling itself is a huge responsibility, and often we think that this is nothing, and it's a very easy thing to do, and everybody can become a counselor, because the administration thinks that through their understanding that counseling is a very easy task to be done, so anyone can do this with little bit of training, and that is not correct. The counselors must be separated from the teaching community. And I have come across cases where school counselors are also sent to classrooms to teach students. Now, how funny is that? Suppose the counselor that is appointed in our institute would come to your class to teach HS electives. Would you accept? So everybody's job is defined, what they are going to do and what they are not supposed to do. So whoever is given this job, they must do their jobs properly. Yes, in that sense, you are very much correct that for specific sectors, we need specifically trained counselors, It is not that one counselor does everything. They are general practitioners. We don't have such kind of specialists in our country. In our country, everybody is a generalist. They know everything, jack of all and master of none. So this is the kind of training that we are getting. And at the end of the day, we are all same. A counselor and a non-counselor, they have the same kind of approach to the society. So how a professional would be regarded as a professional? Now, suppose you are an engineer, you are going to be an engineer. Tomorrow, somebody else who doesn't have this degree of engineering or BTech, he would also say that, well, I am also an engineer. You don't know, you have a degree. I do not have a degree. Just because you have a degree, you just can't tell yourself as an engineer. Do you accept that? With the same logic, we shouldn't accept anybody without a kind of training, without a kind of professional ethics, without a kind of registering body to be a counselor. Thank you. Kushal Gupta.
Going off of your points, sir, it is like this thing of having a counseling, like an administration body for counselors. It is something that sounds good in theory, but is very difficult in practice, because testing someone on whether they can be a counselor or not is not as easy as conducting a written test on like maths or engineering, because we have questions which have very clearly defined answers in many disciplines. But counseling is such an, like, it is such a subjective topic. It's such so deep in its own right that you cannot actually have a test on which you can grade someone on the basis of right or wrong or pass or fail. So I think we need to have research bodies which can come up with ways of actually deeming someone fit for counseling, others or not.
Of course, this is a very important point. It's not like that everybody can apply and everybody can become a counselor. We must see what traits are required to become a counselor and who can become a good counselor. And there are ways to know, like who can become an engineer. How to know this? How come you got an admission in NIT Rourkela? Because you have qualified an aptitude test, that is your JE. So we from that we understood that you have an aptitude to become an engineer, and these 4 years we are training you to become an engineer, a full-fledged engineer, right? So similarly, we can have aptitude test for counselors too. Not that anybody and any Tom, Dick, and Harry would come and do a course and would say
that I'm a counselor. That's just putting
that
people
I am
in
very
danger, because they might be thinking that they're getting counseling of like a trained counselor, but then they're not actually having the guidance that they need.
Very true.
It's as good as talking to someone random. So I
Exactly.
think it needs a little bit more research, but yes, we do have a lot of work to do in this space.
Yes, and why I am talking about this from a health psychological perspective, we are mostly talking about preventive health, and counseling practice is related to preventive aspects of health. So if somebody gets counseling before the situation becomes worse, maybe we can save many people from developing some psychopathology in future. But at the same time, if counseling practices are not regulated in a professional way, we are doing more disservice than service to the community and society at large. There where we need the ethical practices and the guidelines, professional guidelines. Anyone else? Anyone else who would like to have any comments? No one? Thank you. Yes. Who is this?
Akash,
Yeah, Akash. Yeah.
Sir, first of all, I think that whatever the situations when we go to the go for consultation, then we need to know about something like that. Some people have serious problems. Sometimes they do some type of crimes, like you. Hello, you just like, sir, some crime is like sometimes they connect with various kind of relation. So this type of things are make them
Sorry,
serious.
sorry, I couldn't hear you the previous sentence. What do you say?
So I want to say that people do various kind of crimes. What they
Yeah.
think that is crime,
Okay.
like extramarital affair. Some people have extramarital affair, or somebody likes to or see just like a combination. Then that's
Right.
the what happened that they think that it's a crime. That's a problem, and even it's a crime, they do not find a body that who will give him perfect solutions. And another type of thing, some are crimes like drug addiction, another kind of thing that these
Mm.
people want to say that I am a drug addict and I want to come from that type of situation, but there is nobody here to say him the perfect direction. So I think that law, and when people know about laws, and the counselor also have a idea about this perfectly, then it will be a great consolation also. And various kind of problem is also like that. Some, what I want to say that the people who do not have any good direction
Mm.
in his life, he created huge problem. So we need a good direction. That why for we have to implement our law. We have to first say our people that that's law, that's right, that's wrong, and
Yeah.
then counselor can. Then if you do any wrong, is it in a major crime?
Mm.
That you have to go for cancellation, and it's a
Mm.
normal thing. And if cancellation is provided into the whole country, then we can make a good society, good people, because they will not think what they're doing wrong or that type of thing. Yeah, take huge type of time. So that's type of, for that reason human couldn't afford their work perfectly. So I
Right. Right. Right.
so I think a cancellation is a more you have to there everywhere we need a cancellation body, like in Rourkela they need, or NIT Rourkela we have also, but they also more free to the close to the student, that what is going on their mind they have to
Mm.
hear, they have to give solution, perfect solution that will
Mm.
help a lot to everybody. So,
Yeah. I mean, we are largely a confused society now because we have uh, uh, some discrepancies in our rules and our practices. So when rules and practices do not go with each other, then people become confused. When you pray in your schools to be good human being, tell truth, but when you come to your professional practice, you are forced to tell a lie. You get confused. What is correct? Shall I do the way I have been taught, or shall I do so in order to save myself and my other colleagues by telling lie? So, in this situation, most of the counseling practices turn to an advice giving session. And in fact, many people do come to counselors for a direct advice or some kind of direct solutions to their problems. Yes, this is very tricky affair to understand how to proceed with. Uh, Maybe with uh, mm, the authorities understanding the roles and goals of counseling practices, not about counseling practices, about every other field that we are talking about. Even it is applying to your own field. Now, engineers are involved in building bridges and building buildings, and they are collapsing. So that is also required in every field. What is right and what is wrong, what is the right things to do, that is more important for a society to understand. When our relationship fails, we go for legal consultation, why law is required, because we don't believe, we don't trust the other person. That's why law comes into picture. Very complicated things are happening. So, keeping all this in mind, we need to have professional bodies at least to save it from future damage. So, thank you. It was a very fruitful discussion today, and we'll continue with the next one in our next class on psychotherapy. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.